Hello, I'm Dave Barkemeyer, Milam County Judge, and I'm going to spend the next 30 minutes or so going over the 2018 Milam County budget proposal. I've been doing this now every year that I've been county judge. That's been 7 years now, in hopes that I can help you understand as much as possible about the financial operations of your county government. We're trying to do you a good job and trying to be open and transparent about everything we're doing. This is the first page of the 2018 budget proposal. You'll find the proposed budget and, after it's approved, the signed version on the website as well. You'll also find on our website the last 4 years of budgets and the year-end financial statements on there as well. Everything on this first page is required by Texas law, and that Texas law is called the Local Government Code. So the first line on there tells you how much more or less tax revenue we're likely to raise this next year versus last year's, or this current year, budgeted tax revenue, and that amount is $579,000 less than the previous year. The reason it's less is because we set last year's budget before the Luminant protest lawsuit was settled. And at that time, the appraisal district's appraisal of their property was set at $435 million. That was before the settlement, which reduced it to $290 million. So our budget, ad valorem tax revenue, was supposed to be $11,767,000 at the time we were doing the budget, versus this year, or the budget proposal for next year, which will be an estimated revenue of $11,188,000, and that's pretty accurate. The next sentence on there says that we are expected to raise $113,931 in new taxes from the new properties that have been added to the tax rolls since last year. And toward the bottom of the page, you see a number of tax rates, the first of which is the proposed tax rate for next year of 70 cents. And that is the same as it was this past year. So in other words, we're not going to be raising the tax rate because we feel like we can do our budget for next year without having to raise the tax rate on you. And the next line is the effective tax rate of 77.5 cents, which is the rate that would raise the same amount of taxes as we had budgeted for the previous year, which is this year's budget. Again, that was our tax base before the Luminant settlement, which was a lot more than we actually ended up collecting. And that's the reason why it's so much higher, as is the next rate that you see down there, which is the rollback rate, which is about 85 cents. So both the effective rate and the rollback rate calculation for this time around are really irrelevant because they're so much higher than our tax rate proposal of 70 cents. The bottom line on there shows the amount of debt that the county still has, which is $4.64 million. And that is the amount of bonds that we have outstanding on the law enforcement center, plus another $400,000 that we just borrowed here recently for the election equipment that we've just procured. Now, this next overhead that you see here is the budget for 2018. The numbers on the left that you see include the reserves that we have, and we always include in our budget the reserves in case we need them for the coming year. So on the right hand side you see the numbers without the reserves built in, and the right hand numbers really give you a more realistic view of what we'll actually collect and spend in 2018. So the official budget proposal for 2018 for Milam County totals $19,790,868, but the proposal without reserves on the right of $15,630,868 is a little more relevant and does not include the some $4 million in reserves that we have in the official budget. This is the second page of the budget proposal, and at the top right hand of this bunch of numbers is the 2017 budget with the reserves included, and right under it is the 2018 budget with reserves included. So you can kind of compare there the 2017 versus the 2018 official budget. And down in the bottom right hand corner, bottom left hand corner is the actual revenue and expenditure for 2016. I'm not going to go into all of these numbers now. I'll go kind of through all of this as I go through the details through the rest of this presentation of the budget for next year. Now, what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to present to you the revenues of the budget for next year, and then I will go through the expense. Now, this page that you're looking at now is the next page in the budget, and it's actually the first page of the budget detail. And it's the first of 26 pages of the printout, the computer printout of the budget. And each one of these 26 pages look pretty much just like this page. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through each one of these pages in great detail so you'll know exactly what our budget is about for this coming year. Now I'm just kidding you. I'm not going to do that, of course. But I'm going to explain this one page to you, so if you do decide that you want to look at our budget on the website and review it, you'll know what's in there. Now, this first part, this page that you're looking at here, is what's called the general fund. And then following it are the 4 precinct accounts, which each one of our commissioners is responsible for one of these accounts. And then the final sheet is the debt service account. And these actual 6 parts, I guess you'd say, make up our county budget. Now, this first page is the first page of the general fund section. The first 3 pages are the revenue section, and they show the sources of our revenue for the general fund. And the next 13 pages show the expense budget of the some 35 departments that make up the general fund. Each one of these accounts is managed by an elected official or a department head. Then comes the 4 precinct accounts managed by one of the commissioners. And the first page in their source, in their section, shows their sources of revenue, and the next page shows their expense budget. Now, as you see here on this sheet, on every page, the first 3 columns is the last 3 years' actual experience, 2014, 2015, and 2016. The actual revenues and the actual expenses for the last 3 years. Like I say, we've got nothing to hide. It's all right there, how much we collected and how much we spent each of the last 3 years. Then the 4th column is the budget for this year, for 2017. And then the right-hand column is the budget that we're proposing for 2018. And the one in between those two is how much we have spent for the first half of this year, for the first half of 2017. So it's all right there, plain and clear, if you want to look at it line by line in each of the departments, how much they're spending for everything and how much we've collected. All you ever wanted to know about Milam County's expenditures is right there. And in the back, behind this budget detail, we also have several sheets in there that show you the pay levels for all of our different jobs in the county. Now, I've also included on the website, right behind the budget, or right the next item down in there, is these overheads that you're looking at as I go through this presentation. if you want to review any of them. Okay, the first thing I'm going to do is review with you the revenue side of the budget. Then I'll go over the proposed expenditures for next year. Now, on the revenues, of course, the primary source of revenue for the county government is our ad valorem taxes, or the property taxes that you and I pay. The bottom line of this chart that I'm going to jump up here next shows you the property taxes that Milam County, or the county government, has collected since I've been judge, all the way back to 2011, last 7 years, and then what we're proposing for 2018. You can see that in that year, back in 2011, we collected $11.22 million in ad valorem taxes. Now this year in 2017, we're done collecting taxes, all except maybe a few that'll trickle in late. At the end of July, which is when the second payments, those that paid twice, came in, we were pretty well complete collecting. For this year, we've collected $11.05 million, a little bit less than what we collected back in 2011. Now, this coming year, 2018, in our proposed budget, we're projecting that we'll collect $11.19 million, or almost exactly the same amount that we collected back in 2011. And I can tell you that is a pretty accurate estimate. And as you can see, in the in-between years, we've never exceeded collecting more than $11 million in any given year. So what I'm telling you is that in the 7 years, and next year, also for that matter, we have never increased the amount of ad valorem taxes that have been collected for county government use. And most years we've actually collected less taxes than we did in the first year that I was in office. Never have we collected more. But the problem is we've had to go up on the tax rate 10 cents over that time period, from 60 cents to 70 cents per hundred of valuation. And the reason is, as you can see in the top row on this sheet of numbers, is that our tax base has steadily gone down from 1.76 billion in 2011 to where we are today. This past tax roll that we were given by the appraisal district was 1.46 billion. After all the dust settles, we will have $300 million less on our tax rolls in this county. Now, I know many of you are paying more taxes, as I am, as a result of the shifting of the tax load from Luminant, whose valuation has dropped during those years from 2011 to where it is today at $280 million. It's dropped $350 million during that time. But as you can see clearly from their numbers, it's not because, from these numbers I just showed you, it's not because the county is collecting more taxes. It's because we're still collecting the same amount of taxes as we were 7 years ago and in between, and will continue to do so this next year as well. As you'll see when I review the expenditure side of the budget, we have spent more money from time to time during this time period, but that revenue has come from other sources than ad valorem taxes. I'd like to review those sources with you. In fact, about 28% of the county's $15.6 million, as you can see here, comes from other sources. So with $11.2 million coming from ad valorem taxes, that means that some $4.4 million is from other sources. Starting in the general fund departments, in county and district courts, we, along with the probation department, collect fines and fees from defendants who are found guilty or reach plea bargain agreements. These total about $500,000 per year. I won't go through the details on this chart, but you can look at them on the website if you want to. They show a breakdown of these collections over the past 3 years, plus our budget for next year. It's about $500,000 that we collect in fines and fees from in our district court and in my court, the county court. I'm not going to go through all these numbers, as I said, but you can review them if you want to. This next chart shows you the collections of non-traffic fines and fees by the justices of the peace courts and from the constables and their fees that they charge for the work that they do in the 4 precincts. And these total over $200,000 per year. At the very bottom, I show the traffic fines that have been collected, which are collected in the JP courts, with the sheriff's deputies being responsible for over $200,000 of these fines. The ones that are collected anyway, they write more than that, but we only collect a certain percentage of them. The DPS officers write about $125,000 of these, and even our constables, particularly in precinct 3 and 4, write some traffic tickets to the tune of about $25,000 or $30,000. All of these added together total about $350,000 per year, and that's what we've budgeted for next year. All of this totals over $500,000 a year that comes in through the JP courts and the fees that the constables collect for the activities that they carry on. The Sheriff's Department's housing of inmates from Coryell County has by far been the largest single source of additional revenue for the county over these past 3 years. And this overhead here, you see the first line on this chart tells the story. When you add up and the other fees that the Sheriff's Department collects and the traffic fines that the Sheriff's deputies write, they bring in over $1 million a year in additional revenues for the county. Now the next chart that I'm going to show shows what goes on in the tax office. The tax office, of course, collects the $11 million plus in ad valorem taxes that come to the county. And you know that they also collect the taxes for the schools and the cities here in the county, because that's where we all go to pay our taxes. What you may not know is that they charge a fee for the services that they do for the other entities in the county, and those fees add up to over $65,000 a year. Now you couple that with the other $35,000 that they collect over there in fees for other services that they provide, that adds up to over $100,000 per year that they add to the county's cash flow. They also collect the motor vehicle sales tax for the state, and the county's cut in that is about $150,000 a year, and they collect the license plate fees and the county's portion of the license plate fees goes to the precincts, to the 4 precincts for road maintenance, and that amounts to about $750,000 a year. Now all of that added up is close to $1 million a year that they bring in addition to the collection of the ad valorem taxes. Now this next chart shows the health department activities. They also get in on the act, generating revenue by seeking refunds for indigent health care costs from hospitals when the clients become Medicare eligible, then they can get reimbursed for those that have been paid out. And they apply for refunds whenever possible from Medicare for shots and so on. And they charge administration fees whenever administration fees are applicable. And if you add all that up, along with the septic tank inspection fees that we charge, these total over $100,000 per year. All of these other sources of income generated by the general fund departments total about $2.5 million a year. And if you add that to the $1 million plus, about $1.1 million per year these last few years that we received from the half-cent sales tax that the county receives, that's about $3.5 million to $3.6 million that we expect in income from other sources in the general fund each year. And at the bottom of this page, you can see the revenue from other sources that the precincts receive, the 4 precincts. The biggest is the one in the middle, which is the license plate fees that we pay, you and I pay each year. The license plates, or the license stickers, most of the time now, that we pay each year, and we collect those, and we budgeted $700,000 for next year, which is about $175,000 per commissioner, and that combined with about $25,000 each that they get from the state from a fund called the Lateral Road Fund, and that gives them about $200,000 in other income in addition to the $900,000 plus, which is their portion of the county ad valorem taxes. In addition, over the past 2.5 years, they have received the TIF grant money from TxDOT that the state legislature appropriated, and that $2.5 million we've been spending on road improvements. But this year is the last year that we will be having those funds to spend. So, in conclusion, we've spent more money these past 7 years, particularly these past 2 or 3 years, due to that additional TIF money that's been made possible. But we have not increased the revenue allocated to the precincts, and the additional spending in the general fund has come from the additional revenue that's been generated from these other sources that I've just gone over with you. But we have not increased the ad valorem taxes that we've collected. Again, I know many of you are paying more taxes, but this is because of the shifting in the tax base, primarily due to the luminant reduction, and perhaps your school taxes or city taxes have gone up during this time period, but we, the county, are not collecting more taxes. Now let's talk about the county expenditures. I'm going to primarily talk about the general fund because the precincts are spending the same amount of money other than the TIF grant money and some FEMA projects that have been going on as a result of some of the flooding we've had in the last couple of years. I'll mention some pay increases that are being covered by some line item shifts in the fund as well, rather than budget increases. All right. Again, we budgeted in the reserves on the expenditure side, but we also expect to spend we only expect to spend about $15.6 million in 2018, about $10.5 million in the general fund. These next 3 pages show the breakout in expenditure budgets by department. I'm not going to discuss each one of them. You can see the detail of each one on the website if you're interested in looking at all this detail, along with the 3.5-year history that I talked about that's on each one of the pages. Now, over on the right-hand column, you can see the percent of the total that each of the departments represent in the expense side of our budget. You can also see here on this first page where the big amount of our expenditures goes, and that's to the sheriff's department and the jail department, which is also overseen by the sheriff. And those two represent about 25% of the total county budget, which is about $5 million per year. Now, the next page, the general account, which is kind of a catch-all account that we have, is a place where some of our big expenditures fall as well, like health insurance for the retired folks is about $100,000 a year. Workers' compensation about $85,000 a year, and so on. We also spend about $100,000 a year in housing of our excess flow of inmates that we receive from Cordell County. We get more than we can keep in our jail currently, and we have provision for putting the excess over in Lee County and some of them in Falls County. The precincts have their reserves built in as well, as you can see here. Precinct 1 has about 1.2 million, and the other 3 precincts have about 500,000 each. Now this next sheet shows our general fund history during my tenure as county judge. And on this sheet you can see every year but one where we've had a positive cash flow. As I've said before, our tax revenue has not gone up. I've adjusted the 2016 figures that you see here to show the back collection of taxes from Milam after the settlement. So we actually came out with a positive cash flow in 2016 as well, after you take that into account. And projecting what we'll preserve, and projecting that we'll preserve our revenues, our reserves in 2017 this year, that is by borrowing the money to pay for the approximately $400,000 that we spent on the new voting equipment. The projected $10.4 million in expenditures, including paying for the Thorndale building. So if you look at the history of expenditures, I'm projecting that in 2018 we'll spend somewhere not to exceed $10.6 million, and optimistically we may be as low as $10.4 million again in 2018. And if that is the case, then we will actually match again in 2018 the projected revenues of $10.4 million. And if that happens, we'll actually preserve all of our general fund reserves of $800,000 to $900,000, and we'll have our reserves intact going into 2019. That's looking a little bit far ahead in the crystal ball, but optimistically that looks like what might very well happen. So let's look at what we're budgeting for expenditures in 2018 in some detail now. Here you'll see that the first item there, that we've increased the budget for health insurance by $50 a month, or $600 a year per employee, which totals $69,000 a year in additional. Now we're currently paying just over $700 a month for health care coverage for employees, having switched this year from Scott & White to Texas Association of Counties coverage, which is a self-insurance program that involves about 150 counties that have banded together to try to control health care costs. Almost all Texas counties provide coverage at no cost to the employee, and we want to do the same as long as we possibly can. Now that does not include dependents. We only provide the payment, covering the cost of the insurance for the employee, and then the employee pays for the coverage for their dependents. This year Scott & White came to us with a proposal for about a 20% increase in premium because of our experience, and if we just could not afford that without, so we ended up changing providers so that we could continue that coverage for our employees as long as possible. The next item on the list is pay increases of about $35,000 annually, which is primarily due to a $500 increase that we gave in the budget for next year for most of our county employees. Now, this one takes a little bit of explaining. You may recall that earlier this year we had some controversy about the aluminum settlement back in February, when the commissioners voted to grant a 2% across the board increase to our employees. And that was over my objection, based on differing understanding of what we had committed to in the adoption of the 2017 budget. At any rate, that 2% was granted this year, so it's already being paid. Also, we agreed earlier this year to the sheriff's request to increase the pay for his employees to a total of $3,000 a year rather than 2%, or more than the 2% for his staff and the jail employees also. But we had already given $1,000 a year for his employees the previous year in the jail. So the total increase for his employees was $3,000 a year. Now, he stated that he'd do that without any additional funding from the budget by shifting line item amounts within his budget rather than by increasing the budget. And that was done by that he would not add an additional deputy. So looking at the budget impact for this next year, there is no additional increase for all the Sheriff's Department employees, since they've already received more than anyone else this year. In other words, they won't get the additional $500 in 2018. Also, the commissioners decided that most of their crew members in the 4 precincts are to receive a $1,000 increase instead of $500, and the commissioners themselves are going to be adjusted upward to $48,000 to get their pay in the right proportion to other elected officials in the county. So, but they're going to do that, all the increases within their departments, by line item shifts rather than increasing their budget in 2018 as well. So there's no budget impact by their increases. So the only budget impact is the impact that comes from the $500 increase for the other employees other than the precinct employees and the Sheriff's Department employees. Okay, back to the original list of increases. Then the only impact you see on this list on the budget is the $35,000 increase caused by the $500 increase for certain employees. The third item shown on this list is the addition of 2 part-time employees, one in the district clerk's office and one in the tax office. Total impact of that is $43,000. And both of these departments had asked for another full-time employee to help with workload, but we asked them to hold off on hiring a full-timer for now because of the uncertainty of the situation with luminance valuation that will come up this next year. Each department already had another part-timer, and the addition of this one gives them enough money in their budget for the full-time person that they asked for. So if at budget planning time in 2018 it becomes clear that the county will be able to afford the 2 additional full-timers, then we'll allow them at that time to proceed with hiring the full-timer. If not, then it'll be much easier to do whatever is necessary at that time, even further cutting costs if we need to without having to lay off employees. The county attorney's office, Bill Torrey, had also asked for a part-time clerk, and we told him to go ahead since he has money for an assistant attorney in his department because he has money that he has acquired on a grant to pay for that position. And so at this time there is no impact on the budget for this part-timer as well. Now, the next item on this list is a $25,000 addition to the budget for elections, and we always have to do that in the election year, which is coming in an election year, which this coming year, 2018, is an election year again. Some of that money is reimbursed by the political parties for the primary and by the state for the general election, so that's not, some of that will be recovered. We'll also have the first note payment to be made on the voting equipment, which will be about $10,000 or $12,000 in 2018. Let me show you how we intend to pay for the $400,000 that we borrowed to pay for that equipment, how we intend to pay that back. This overhead here shows in the third column over how we'll pay that back, how we pay back the principal, and over the next 7 years, with most of it being paid in a lump sum payment in the 7th year. That year is year 2025, which is the first year after we made the last payment on the Law Enforcement Center bonds. So at that time, we'll have about $666,000 less in our budget, because we won't have any bond payments left after that, and we can easily pay off the remaining $355,000 that's left on the voting equipment in a lump sum payment at that time. Now, in the next 6 years, we basically pay interest on the 2.6% at 2.6%, plus a small amount of the principal, about $10,000 a year, to minimize the impact on our budget in the interim. All right, the next item on the list here of additional things on the budget is we approved an additional full-time position, which is the only additional full-time position that we put in for a position in our county auditor's office. Danica already had a part-time position in her budget, so converting that to a full-time position added $16,000 to her budget. One of the reasons for adding the person in addition to her is the additional workload in her department, and also the need for some internal auditing for county departments, so many of which handle money on a periodic basis, a task that she just hasn't had time to do. And we've been criticized some for not doing an adequate amount of internal auditing. So this should give her the additional workforce that she needs to free her up to do some internal auditing on a periodic basis. The other thing that we have learned that we're going to have to do, and we've needed to be doing it all along, is to switch to the accrual-based accounting from a cash-based accounting, which we've been doing ever since I've been county judge and before, and we're now going to be required to switch to accrual accounting, and that's going to require some additional work in her department also. This year we've hired a new accounting firm, Singleton and Clark, to conduct the external audit after having retained Patillo, Brown and Hill these past 8 years or so. This is not going to have any impact on our budget. Actually, it will cost us maybe a few $1,000s less, we think. We also made some changes in constable pay that does not have any direct impact on the budget as well, although it should positively impact our budget in that 2 of our constables in precinct 3 and 4 have been actively involved in traffic patrol, which helps with the traffic fine income. Now, next on our list, you see several increases in the sheriff's operations and jail budget to help with vehicle repair expenses, which are ultimately reimbursed by insurance, and we've added some money to his overtime budgets in both departments, about $10,000 each, to help with an increased workload. And we increased the new equipment budget by $11,000 due to increased vehicle prices and so on. A couple of departments increased their request for budget. Juvenile probation asked for a budget increase of $6,000, and the appraisal district asked for an increase of $10,000. We also reinstated a grant to the Historical Commission for $5,000, which had been discontinued the previous year because of our tight situation on money, and we explained to them that there's no guarantee that we'll be able to do this again next year. So, that's a summary of the major changes to the general fund budget. There are a few line items that were reduced. If you look over the budget, you'll notice them as you go through. I feel pretty confident that we'll get through the year without having to borrow the $200,000 that we spent over in Thorndale to build a new building to house our county offices over there as a result of losing our lease on our building where we were located there. And I believe we'll end 2018 with almost all of our general fund reserves of $800,000 or so intact. That means that we'll spend no more than the revenue that we take in next year in the general fund, which will be $6.9 million in ad valorem taxes and $3.6 million from other sources, for a total of about $10.5 million in expenditures. Thank you.